Greetings, my name is Owen Ryder, and I am the author of the Christian book, The Hourglass by Owen Ryder. From the time we are born, we are subject to voices, both audible and inaudible, that will greatly influence our emotional development in this life. That perspective can consist of a wide variety of information and experiences, both beneficial to our self-worth as well as that which is not beneficial to our self-worth. Consequently, the quality of that which we may call our inner narrative is then that which can, figuratively speaking, make or break us with regard to our physical, psychological, and importantly, spiritual well-being. In his letter to the Galatian churches, Paul the Apostle, the author of this letter, makes mention in chapter 2 of a confrontation between Paul and his fellow apostle Peter, the reason of which was differing doctrinal understandings. For despite the church having been primarily established in Jerusalem, where the original apostles remained, the influence of Judaism or the existing Jewish religious customs was still influential, and the survival of the early Jerusalem church was tenuous at best. And whereas the church taught of the grace of Jesus Christ, the Jewish Christians were advocating Christ plus some lawful commandment-driven practices, which the gospel is not asking us to live up to because it takes the focus off of Christ. The specific problem in this case stemmed from Jewish Christian converts requiring their Gentile or non-Jewish Christian brothers to be subject to such Jewish practices as circumcision, which raised the ultimate question, why were such things still needed, given the grace nature at the heart of the gospel? The incident Paul mentions in his letter takes place in Antioch, at what appears to be a meeting of Christian leaders. Paul saw Peter as straddling the issue, as he seemed less an advocate of grace when his Jewish Christian brothers were on scene. In Galatians 2:11 it says Paul, quote, opposed Peter to his face, end quote. So even then the church began to break into factions, as Peter, at this time, seemed to be playing both sides of the issue, much to Paul's displeasure. As for Peter personally, despite having been one of the original apostles, his Jewish upbringing and thus familiarity with the strictness and legalistic demands of Judaism sunk deeper into his soul than he seemed to realize. That was in contrast to the message of grace and/or favor, which Christ embodied, established, and Paul so eloquently taught on in his letter to the Romans. One could say then that Peter's, and I quote, inner voice, end quote, caused him to remain a victim of the fear and doubt which stemmed from an unacknowledged inability to fulfill the religious and moral perfection that the Jewish law and its commandments demanded. And for the sake of transparency, we too share in Peter's plight in our own personal way, as we too, beginning in our youth, have been subject to dialogue that hopefully had a good effect on us, though due to the fall of mankind there is the likelihood that it did not. An inner voice, as the title states, which can be supplanted by the actions and words of a grace-filled Savior, who despite suffering on our behalf, still won the battle and overcame the world for us. Consequently, we should never think too highly of ourselves, or lowly for that matter, but to by faith simply look away to Jesus and thus marvel at his glorious and victorious finished work. My name is Owen Ryder. Thanks for listening.